A few weeks ago, we discussed George Rigby, Isabella Rigby area in the Canoe Freewill Cemetery, and I thought it worthy to discuss it a little bit deeper, as this past Saturday on February 1st, 2025, I began trying to clean the headstone of their son, Elijah Rigby. It's kind of a sad story on him. I think it's worthy to kind of look back at how the Rigbys arrived in this part of the area. George and Isabella moved to the Robinsonville Canoe area sometime around the 1880s. George had come from the Wilcox-Monroe County line area. His mother was named China Rigby, and his father was Elijah G. Rigby. With the gathering clouds of the war between the states, Elijah Rigby joined the 23rd Alabama Infantry Regiment, which organized at Montgomery, Alabama in November of 1861. The men of this regiment came from Wilcox, Macon, Monroe, Clark, Conecuh, Marengo, Lowndes, Baldwin, and Choctaw County. Young George Rigby was around 2 years of age when his father marched away to the drumbeat of war. Elijah, in his early 20s, enlisted as a private in Company A of the regiment. And then he headed to Mobile, and during the next 2 months, the regiment suffered 82 men lost by disease. This could have been from typhus, cholera, dysentery, measles. Oftentimes, many of these men had never been more than 20 miles from home, and being crowded into such areas, diseases would sweep through the camps like epidemics. And he passed away, and he was one of those that died. His widow, China, applied for a claim on her deceased husband with the Confederate War Department on April 30th, 1864, from Monroeville, Alabama. Another document lists her filing on October 19th, 1863. Elijah's unit would go on from Mobile. His comrades fought in Tennessee, was active in Kentucky. Then in December 1862, they were transferred to do battle at Chickasaw Bayou, Port Gibson, Champions Hill, Big Black River Bridge, and Vicksburg, where the regiment was captured and later paroled. The men fought on through Chattanooga to Atlanta and ended the war in North Carolina. During December 1861, the men numbered 674, but by January 1865, their number had been reduced to 374, and by April 1865, only 75 were left. So George Rigby would never really know his father, and as he was growing up in the Wilcox-Monroe County line area, he was certainly faced a lot of challenges. Meanwhile, that war had a big effect on Canoe Station as well. There were soldiers assigned to Canoe. There was a 7th Confederate Cavalry Regiment out of Mississippi. There was Colonel Ball and Colonel Armistead that were stationed in this area. And there was also a lot of troops that come from Pollard. There's old newspaper notices out of the Greenville newspaper ordering the men to report to duty in Canoe Station or be considered absent without leave. And so the area around where the Freewill Cemetery was, we believe Camp Hunter, a Confederate camp at Canoe Station, was centered there. They would have been there guarding the railroad trestle as well as guarding the mineral springs there where they would have watered their horses and such as that. And that was a major area of contention later in the war when the Union came out of Pensacola in the last grand act of the war, which was the Eastern Shore Campaign, where they come up through Canoe as other troops came up through Baldwin County, fought the battle at Spanish Fort and Blakely, and then the war ended. After the war ended and people tried to put their lives back together, in the late 1880s, and a little bit before that, an event happened called the Big Cut, and that was where the virgin timber in this area was cut, and people made vast fortunes overnight. And what you would have would be big sawmills pop up, like the Kearney Mill in Atmore. And what Kearney would do, he would cut the timber off of the land, and then he would sell the land really cheap, and then the farmer that bought the land, he would most likely buy the lumber to build his home and barns from the Kearney Mill in Atmore. Therefore, Kearney made money at every step of the process. He made money off of the cutting of the timber, off the selling of the land, and then off of the farmer and the locals around there buying the lumber to build homes and such. And this is the environment that George and Isabella Rigby came in when they arrived here. And when they made it here, they probably were able to buy some of that land really cheap to establish homesteads. A lot of the farmland in Monroe County was either taken or farmed out. A lot of people farmed on halves after the war between the states. And so anytime there was an opening of cheap farmland, of course, people were going to move. And that's why you've got so many settlers that come from Monroe, Canoe, Wilcox, and all of that. And they moved into the Atmore and Canoe Station area to buy that, cheap land. And that was kind of the way that worked. George and Isabella married in Monroe County around the 1880s. The couple was among several Rigby family members that settled in this area. It has been said that a Rigby homestead existed in a grand old home which sat at the crossroads of Canoe Road North, Page Road, and Helton Road, just north of Canoe. The home had a tin top which covered the remains of wooden shingles from an earlier era. There was a dog trot down the center of the house. There was a huge barn beside the house, which burned around November 1980, or the New Year's Eve 1985. It has been said the home was built in the 1880s. Whereas it had sat empty for years, Hurricane Ivan further damaged the old homestead, and eventually it was torn down. Many believe that could be where the Rigby home was at. As a young man, I understood Mr. J.D. Page to say this was the home of George Rigby. The Rigby children in the home were Elijah Rigby, Cora, May, and William Rigby. May Rigby would later become May Page and was the mother of J.D. Page. And, of course, Elijah was named after his grandfather that passed in the war. There was a tragedy struck the family on December 29th, 1912, when 23-year-old Elijah Rigby passed away. There was a almost like an obituary in the Atmore record for him on Thursday, January 16th, 1913, which said, Elijah Rigby died at home of brother George Rigby near Canoe, Alabama on Sunday, December the 29th. Brother Rigby was in the 23rd year. He was converted and baptized into the fellowship of the Baptist Church at Robinsonville by Elder Day when he was about 18 years old. The writer has known few young men whose character and Christian life was more orderly than his. He was a sufferer for a long time, but never complained. As his pastor, I feel a keen loss in his going. He was laid to rest in the cemetery at Canoe on Monday, December 30th, where he awaits the coming of the Lord. May God comfort the bereaved family and friends and give grace to bear their sorrows, is a prayer of their pastor, and that's Reverend W.N. Huckabee. And, of course, after that, the area, those headstones set for quite a while. A lot of years have passed since that fateful December of 1912. And these older stones, the way they were made, they just have not held up very well with the pH changing in our rain over the years. And so it's become necessary to go in there and try to clean them up with various chemicals. And you have to be careful with that because sometimes you can do more harm than good. But we've recently started restoring these graves at Canoe, trying to clean the headstones. And currently there's a book being worked on about the various biographies and stories of the people that are there. So I hope you'll take the opportunity to purchase that when it comes out. I hope this video has been a good bit of information that's usable in the search for people's families, and it also creates a good backdrop to the people that's out there, so that they're not just headstones in a cemetery, but actually gives you a sense of the life behind the people that live there. So thank you for watching. Please watch for future videos, and have a good rest of your day.